G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. How far art thou, YouTube? Personally, I'm about to commence drinking the fourth beer of the day. As you can see by the lineup there within. And the topic of this video is times when I've been wrong. That's why I commenced the video with a close-up shot of my radio playing classical music. You see, years ago, probably 4 years or so, on the day that I was carving this pipe, I was also making a video on pipe carving. And because the sound of wood rasps chewing away at the wood was kind of a bit boring, and like, to concentrate on doing a good job, you have to shut up and look at it and get into it. I thought it was a really good idea to have the camera or mobile phone on a tripod, and I had my radio tuned into ABC, that's Australian Broadcasting Commission, radio, FM Radio Classic, right? It's a particular bandwidth, covers the whole continent, and all they do 24 hours a day is play classical music and talk about it, maybe perhaps 10 minutes for every hour worth of playing. So I made 4 videos, ran for 15 minutes each, on how to carve a pipe, like how to drill 2 holes in one piece of wood, have them intersect at 90 degrees, have one long hole, one short hole, then, carve a pipe around the 2 holes. And then I uploaded them. And when I uploaded them, what happened to me was, I think it was number 3 of the videos. Could have been 3 and 4. But anyway, as soon as it uploaded, it showed on my mobile phone, because I don't have a computer, it showed up there as being not available on mobile. And it puzzled the shittery out of me for a while, but then I had a bit of a chat to a few people via the comments threads, and they explained to me that what had probably happened was that the copyright to the particular piece of classical music that was being played during that video was owned by iTunes, and therefore it was against some kind of a copyright software protocol for that particular song to be downloaded from YouTube to anybody who tried to look at it, even though YouTube had uploaded it from my mobile phone. So the phone I uploaded the video on wasn't considered good enough in the eyes of YouTube. Excuse me, I burped. It's a malt liquor video. Rugby. Yeah, as I was saying, I got blocked on my own movie from my mobile phone that uploaded the movie. That's a time when I was wrong, but it's not the biggest time I was wrong. The biggest time that I was wrong, pretty much, since I moved up here to live, which was in March 1994. So in 22 years, the most outstanding time that I was wrong, the time that I really, totally, completely got it balls up, it had to do with the radio, because on the radio, I heard a bloke pontificating on the subject of how to save fuel. And he said that he worked in the fuel industry, or the petroleum industry, the refining and transport industry. And he said that he knew what he was talking about, and he sounded as if he really did. And what he suggested was that the most effective way to save money on your weekly fuel burn was to pay attention to what time of the day you bought your fuel. He said that during the night, when the bowsers and the hoses and the pumps and the concrete with the hoses buried under it from the underground bunker, the underground tank where the refined fuel is stored, when all that gets cold soaked at night while the infrared is radiating out into space, it all cools down. He said if you show up early in the morning and you buy your fuel early in the morning, you will be buying cold refined petroleum. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's diesel or petrol or whatever, it's going to be cold. Okay? Rugby. And what that meant, he said, was that as hydrocarbons lower in their temperature, they actually shrink physically in space. They contract. And I knew as a time expired aeroplanologist, I knew that one of the reasons that jet airliners and fighter planes and bombers and all those things, as well as petrol powered single seat light aircraft competing for the Colibri International Trophy, they all measure their fuel by weight rather than by volume, is because hydrocarbons do indeed expand and contract as the temperature changes. So what this fellow was saying didn't actually sound beyond the bounds of reasonability, if you under can stumble what I be meanings. And I had been, at the time, going to town after lunch so I could pick up my kids at the local school, on a Friday afternoon. And I had been shopping while my kids were staying with my mother. And then I'd been either going to the pub with a friend of mine, picking up my kids afterwards and going home. This is on a Friday night. I usually bought fuel on a Friday. And I had noticed that there were various times when the bowser, the hoses, the concrete, it had all been in the sun all day. The temperature was up around 50, 60, 70 degrees Celsius. I have had vapor locks while trying to pump fuel into my car because the metal pipe from the underground tank to the bowser was so close to the surface, buried in the concrete slab, that the fuel was vaporizing by the time it got to my tank. So it all kind of made sense. And I commenced driving to town early in the morning, like just specifically to buy fuel. But the problem is the way my day runs, there's not a whole lot of point in being in town early in the morning. And although initially, when I very first began to do it, I started showing a 10 or 15% improvement in my fuel efficiency over time, because I was meticulous and obsessive enough to actually continue to record my odometer reading and my fuel gauge and how much fuel I was putting in time after time after time. Kept on doing it. I eventually found that the alleged effect evaporated. And I stress here, smooth. I stress here, it did take several months for the apparent effect to disappear. But eventually it evaporated. And after a while, it slowly occurred to me, and I was pretty reluctant to accept this because I'd actually gone to the point of not only telephoning the local ABC radio station to announce, this marvelous way of saving 10 or 15% of your fuel bill by showing up early in the morning and buying the fuel when it was cold. Cold petrol. I thought it was marvellous. But I'd also sat down at the typewriter and produced a couple of pages of enthusiastic ravings and rantings about the process, and I'd photocopied them and posted them out to all my friends and said, like, Yahoo, yippee, here's a way to save money. And when it evaporated, it took me a while to figure out what it had been, why it had evaporated, why I'd seen it. And the story is, that particular episode of me being wrong, being completely wrong, sucked in by a bullshit rave, like, yes, hydrocarbons expand and contract with temperature, but it's not going to make any more than a 2 or 3% difference to your fuel burn. It's not ever going to be 10%. Certainly not 10 or 15 like I thought I was seeing. So why did I think I was seeing it? That's a very interesting point. You see, when you go to town in the afternoon and you come home at maybe 9:30 or 10:30 at night, you have to run your headlights on high beam all the way home. Whereas when you go to town at 7 o'clock in the morning, just to buy your cold fuel, as the man on the radio had suggested, you come home with no lights on. You have not got your headlights burning. They are not sucking current from the battery. The battery is not being replenished from the alternator. The alternator is not generating magnetic drag, which is not impeding the drive pulley on the crankshaft. And therefore, if you come home during the day with your cold fuel, you're not running your headlights on the way home. And that thing's got like 150, 200 watts worth of headlights. And when I woke up to myself on that one and I realised just what an idiot I'd made of myself, I felt like a bit of a fool. But as it happened, later on, the reason I realised that this thing needed to have a 30-watt solar panel on the roof was because I had recognised how much of a change to your fuel burn running your headlights made when they're burning and sucking power through the alternator and the engine from the fuel tank. So, the reason I decided that my road vehicle required a streamlined solar panel, which I like to call a sun foil. It runs on sunlight and it happens to be an aerofoil, to charge its battery, is because my experience of believing in the powers of cold petrol, though it sort of kind of made me look like a bit of a fool for a few months, it did teach me how much fuel it takes to run the electrics of a modern automobile, aka vehicle, otherwise known as a car. So there you go, and now you know how I would never ever have become inspired to construct the Mark I sunfoil, let alone the third prototype, or the sunfoil Mark VIII, if I had not made such an idiot of myself in the 3 or 6 months when I was believing in the merits of cold petrol. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.